The great chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as High Arbiter Zelvrix rose from his seat. His pale blue skin seemed to glow under the floating lights, and his 4 eyes moved slowly across the gathered representatives. 11 species sat in their designated places. Watching the drama unfold before them, in the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Diana Cole. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that showed no fear. Behind her, visible through the massive windows, floated the 12 ships of Earth's diplomatic fleet. They looked small against the endless stars. "The vote is complete," Zelvrix announced. His voice echoed through the chamber like a cold wind. 11 in favor, 1 opposed. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Diana did not flinch. She had expected this outcome from the moment the emergency session was called. The crime Earth had committed was simple. They had refused to hand over 3,000 refugees from the destroyed colony world of Kasara. The Council had demanded their surrender. Earth had said, "No. You are making a terrible mistake," Diana said. Her voice was calm but firm. "Those refugees came to us for protection. They were running from the same raiders who destroyed their world. We will not deliver innocent people to their deaths." Zelvrix's thin lips curled into something like a smile. "Your species has been a problem since the day you joined this council. You question our decisions. You ignore our traditions. You act as if your tiny planet has any right to challenge powers that ruled the stars before your ancestors learned to make fire." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Diana noticed that not all the representatives looked pleased, but none of them spoke up. Fear kept them silent. The council had ways of punishing those who disagreed. "We joined this council in good faith," Diana replied. "We followed your rules. We contributed to your economy. We sent our soldiers to fight in your wars. And now, because we showed mercy to helpless people, you cast us out like garbage." "Mercy?" Zelvrix laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "You call it mercy. We call it dangerous independence. Humanity thinks it can decide right and wrong for itself. That kind of thinking threatens the stability of the entire galaxy." Diana looked around the chamber one last time. She saw representatives who owed their lives to human soldiers. She saw species whose planets had been saved by human aid ships. None of them would meet her eyes. "Very well," she said quietly. "We will leave. But remember this moment, High Arbiter. Remember it when the darkness comes and you find yourselves alone." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her steps echoed in the silent chamber. Admiral Jack Morrison was waiting for her in the shuttle bay. He was a man in his 60s with a weathered face and steady hands. 20 years of service had taught him patience, but even he felt anger burning in his chest as Diana approached. "How bad?" he asked. "As bad as it gets," Diana replied. "Full expulsion. We have 6 hours to leave council space." Morrison nodded slowly. He had prepared for this possibility. Behind him, Captain Ryan Brooks stood at attention, his young face tight with controlled fury. "Sir," Brooks said, "our ships are ready. But the council has sent an escort fleet. 40 warships to make sure we leave." Morrison almost laughed. 40 ships to escort 12. The council wanted to humiliate them one last time. They wanted humanity to feel small and defeated. "Let them watch," Morrison said. "We'll give them nothing to remember but our dignity." The journey out of council space took 3 days. 40 alien warships surrounded Earth's small fleet like predators circling wounded prey. They did not attack, but their presence was a constant reminder of humanity's new status. Exiles, outcasts, unwanted. On the bridge of his flagship, the Resolute, Admiral Morrison watched the stars pass by. Diana stood beside him, her arms crossed over her chest. "What do you think will happen now?" she asked. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. They think they've broken us. They think we'll crawl back to Earth and hide in our solar system forever. They're wrong. The Council controls all the major trade routes, Diana reminded him. Without their markets, our economy will struggle. Without their technology sharing programs, our research will slow down. They've cut us off from everything. They've cut us off from their rules, Morrison corrected her. Their restrictions. Their demands. For the first time in 50 years, humanity answers to no one but itself. Diana looked at him with surprise. You almost sound grateful. Not grateful, Morrison said. Determined. The Council never saw us as equals. They saw us as useful servants. Now we have a chance to show them what humanity can really do. The fleet crossed the border into human space on the morning of the 4th day. The escort ships stopped at the invisible line and watched them go. Morrison imagined the alien captains laughing among themselves, celebrating their easy victory. He activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice reached every crew member on every ship. This is Admiral Morrison. Today marks the end of our time as members of the Galactic Council. Some of you may feel angry. Some may feel afraid. Both feelings are natural. But I want you to understand something important. They think they've silenced us. They've only made us free. We will return home. We will rebuild. And one day, the galaxy will understand that exiling humanity was the worst mistake the Council ever made. When the message ended, a strange calm settled over the fleet. The crews went back to their duties with a new sense of purpose. Something had changed. Something had begun. On Earth, the news arrived before the fleet did. People gathered in the streets to watch the broadcasts. Politicians gave angry speeches. Protesters marched outside embassies that would soon be empty. But beneath the anger, something else was growing. A quiet determination. A shared understanding that humanity would not fade away quietly. The galaxy had rejected them. Fine. They would build something new. Something better. Something that would make the Galactic Council tremble. The fleet arrived home to cheering crowds and waving flags. Admiral Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the view screen. Beside him, Diana wiped tears from her eyes. Welcome home, she whispered. Morrison nodded. The real work begins now. 10 years passed in silence. The Galactic Council stopped thinking about Earth after the first year. Their spies reported nothing interesting. Human space had gone quiet. No ships came out. No signals went in. The tiny planet at the edge of the galaxy had seemingly accepted its fate and faded into irrelevance. High Arbiter Zelrix occasionally mentioned humanity during council meetings, always with a satisfied smile. You see, he would say, they were never a real threat. Without our guidance, they have collapsed into nothing. The other representatives nodded and moved on to more important matters. Earth was forgotten, but Earth had not collapsed. Earth was working. President Nathan Ward stood in the observation deck of the orbital station above Mars. Below him, stretching across hundreds of kilometers of space, was the greatest shipyard humanity had ever built. Thousands of workers moved between massive construction frames. Sparks flew as welders joined metal plates together. Cargo ships carried materials from the asteroid belt in an endless stream. How many now? The president asked. Dr. Megan Torres checked her tablet. She was a small woman with tired eyes and oil-stained hands. For 10 years, she had barely slept. For 10 years, she had dreamed of this moment. 412 warships, she replied. The last batch of Defiance-class cruisers will be complete by next month. After that, we start on the carriers. Ward shook his head slowly. When he had announced the Horizon Initiative 10 years ago, many people thought he was crazy. Building a secret fleet while hiding from the galaxy seemed impossible. But humanity had proven once again that impossible was just another word for difficult. "Show me the Defiance," he said. Torres led him through the station to a private viewing chamber. Through the reinforced glass, they could see the pride of the human fleet. The Defiance was a heavy cruiser, 300 meters long and bristling with weapons. Its hull was painted dark gray, almost black, designed to disappear against the emptiness of space. "She's beautiful," Ward whispered. "She's deadly," Torres corrected him. "We took everything we learned from captured alien technology and made it better. Their shields are good. Ours are better. Their weapons are powerful. Ours are devastating. When this fleet moves, nothing in the galaxy will be able to stop it." The president placed his hand on the glass. "I hope we never have to use it." Torres looked at him with surprise. "Then why did we build it?" "Because strength keeps the peace," Ward replied. "The Council expelled us because they thought we were weak. They will never make that mistake again." Across the solar system, similar scenes played out every day. Shipyards orbited Jupiter's moons. Mining operations stripped asteroids for raw materials. Training academies on Earth and Mars prepared crews for ships that did not officially exist. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Gray was one of those crew members. He stood on the bridge of a training vessel, running simulations against imaginary enemies. At 28 years old, he had never seen real combat. None of the young officers had. But they trained as if war was coming tomorrow. "Enemy fleet detected," the computer announced. 40 contacts bearing 270. Gray studied the tactical display. The simulated enemy was using Council formation patterns. He knew them by heart. Every officer in the fleet did. "All ships form defensive line," he ordered. "Weapons free on my command." Chief Engineer Sandra Blake watched from the observation room above. She had served in the old fleet before the exile. She had seen the Council's arrogance up close. Now she watched a new generation prepare to answer that arrogance with fire. "They're good," she said to the officer beside her. "They're the best we've ever trained," the officer replied. "When the time comes, they'll be ready." Blake nodded slowly. "The question is whether the time will ever come. We've been hiding for 10 years. How much longer can we stay invisible?" The answer came 3 months later. Admiral Morrison, now 63 years old, received the intelligence report in his private quarters. He read it twice to make sure he understood. Then he called an emergency meeting of the fleet commanders. "The Voran Dominion," he said, projecting the data onto the main screen. "A military empire from the far edge of the galaxy. They've been expanding for decades, but now they're moving toward Council space." Diana Cole, who had stayed on as a civilian advisor, leaned forward. "How big is their fleet?" "Our estimates say over 2,000 warships," Morrison replied. "The Council's combined fleet is less than half that size." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Council that had cast humanity aside was about to face a threat they could not defeat. "What do we do?" Captain Brooks asked. He was older now, with lines on his face that had not been there 10 years ago. But his eyes still burned with the same fire. Morrison looked around the table. He saw faces he had known for years. Good people, loyal people, people who had every reason to hate the Council and everything it represented. "We have a choice," Morrison said slowly. "We can stay hidden. We can watch the Council burn and tell ourselves they deserved it. No one would blame us, or—" Diana prompted. Morrison stood and walked to the window. The shipyard stretched out before him, hundreds of vessels waiting in perfect formation. "Or we remember who we are. We remember that humanity does not abandon the helpless. We remember that our strength means nothing if we only use it for ourselves." The room remained quiet. Then, one by one, the commanders began to nod. "Contact President Ward," Morrison ordered. telling the Horizon Initiative has a new mission. On Earth, the president received the news with a heavy heart. He had hoped the fleet would never be needed. He had prayed for peace. But the galaxy had other plans. He stood before the world leaders and spoke the words that would change history. "They cast us out," he said. "But we are still part of this galaxy. And when innocent people cry out for help, humanity answers. Prepare the fleet. We're going back." The silent years were over. The Armada was ready to fly. The Vorn Dominion attacked without warning. Their fleet appeared at the edge of Council, space like a swarm of locusts descending on a field of grain. 2,000 warships, each one carrying weapons designed for destruction and crews trained for conquest. At their head flew the Dominion flagship, a massive vessel called the Crushing Hand, commanded by Warlord Kethrak himself. Kethrak was a monster even by Vorn standards. His gray skin was covered with ritual scars, and his yellow eyes held no mercy. He had conquered 40 worlds before turning his attention to the Galactic Council. Each conquest had taught him the same lesson. The weak existed to serve the strong. The first Council world to fall was Nexera Prime. Its population of 3 billion received only 6 hours' notice before the Dominion fleet arrived. The Planetary Defense Force fought bravely, but they were outnumbered 10 to 1. By morning, Nexera Prime was burning. High Arbiter Zelvrix watched the reports come in with growing horror. 3 more worlds fell in the first week, 5 more in the second. The Dominion was not interested in negotiation. They wanted complete surrender or total annihilation. "We must combine our forces," Zelvrix announced during an emergency council session. "Every species must contribute every ship they have. Together, we can stop this invasion." The combined council fleet gathered near the Varanthos system. 800 warships from 11 species formed the largest military force the council had ever assembled. Admiral Yevris, a Tarvani like Zelvrix, took command. He was confident and proud, certain that superior numbers would carry the day. He was wrong. The Battle of Sentinel Gate lasted less than 3 hours. The Dominion fleet cut through the council formation like a blade through water. Admiral Yevris died when his flagship exploded under concentrated fire. 300 council ships were destroyed. The rest fled in chaos. On the Crushing Hand, Warlord Kethrak watched the scattered remains of the council fleet disappear into hyperspace. He smiled, revealing rows of sharpened teeth. "Set course for Varanthos Prime," he ordered. "It is time to end this." Lieutenant Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the human reconnaissance vessel Starfall. Her ship was hidden in the debris field of an abandoned mining station, watching the Dominion fleet pass by. She had been gathering intelligence for 3 weeks, and what she had learned terrified her. "They're heading for the council headquarters," she reported over the secure channel. "If Varanthos falls, the council is finished." Admiral Morrison received the transmission in his command center. Around him, 400 ships waited in formation, their engines warm and their weapons loaded. The largest fleet humanity had ever built was ready to move. "How long until the Dominion reaches Varanthos?" he asked. 48 hours at their current speed," Sullivan replied. Morrison closed his eyes. 48 hours. That was enough time to reach the system. But was it enough time to make a difference? Diana Cole entered the command center with a datapad in her hand. "I just received a message from Varanthos Prime. High Arbiter Zelvrix is requesting aid from every known species. He's desperate. Did he mention us?" Morrison asked. Diana shook her head. "No. He probably assumes we don't exist anymore." Morrison stared at the tactical display. Red dots showed the Dominion fleet moving toward Varanthos. Blue dots showed the scattered remnants of the Council forces, too damaged and disorganized to mount any real defense. Between them and annihilation stood nothing. "They threw us away," he said quietly. They called us dangerous. They said we threatened galactic stability. He turned to face his officers. Tell me why we should help them. Captain Brooks stepped forward. Because that's not who we are. We don't let innocent people die just because their leaders made bad choices. Chief Engineer Blake nodded. The Dominion won't stop with the Council. If they win here, they'll eventually come for us too. Better to fight them now, while we have allies, than later when we're alone. Lieutenant Commander Gray, now commanding his own cruiser, spoke through the communication channel. Sir, every person in this fleet joined because they believed in something bigger than revenge. If we turn our backs now, we become exactly what the Council always accused us of being. Selfish, dangerous, unworthy of trust. Morrison listened to each voice. He had expected these answers. He had hoped for them. Contact President Ward, he ordered. Tell him we need his final authorization. The response came within the hour. The president appeared on screen, his face tired but determined. I've consulted with the world leaders, Ward said. The decision is unanimous. We did not build this fleet for vengeance. We built it for protection. If there are people who need protecting, then our path is clear. Morrison nodded slowly. Understood, sir. Jack, the president said, using his first name for the first time in years. Bring our people home safely and show the galaxy what humanity can do. The channel closed. Morrison turned to his crew with fire in his eyes. All ships, set course for the Varanthos system. Maximum speed. We're going to crash a party. The fleet moved as one. 400 ships accelerated into hyperspace, leaving trails of light behind them. For 10 years, they had hidden in the shadows. Now they raced toward the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen. On the Starfall, Kate Sullivan watched them go. She had never seen anything so beautiful. An armada built in secret, crewed by people who had been rejected and humiliated, now flying to save the very ones who had cast them out. Good luck, she whispered into the empty void far ahead. The Dominion fleet continued its march toward Varanthos Prime. Warlord Kethrak sat on his command throne, already planning the victory celebrations. He had studied the Council for years. He knew their weaknesses. He knew their fears. What he did not know was that 400 human warships were racing to meet him. He did not know that the species the Council had exiled and forgotten had spent 10 years preparing for this moment. He was about to learn. The sky above Varanthos Prime was filled with death. Warlord Kethrak's fleet had arrived 6 hours ahead of schedule. Nearly 2,000 Dominion warships now surrounded the Council headquarters, their weapons pointed at the planet below. 7 billion people waited for the end. High Arbiter Zelvrix stood in his private chamber, staring at the fleet through his window. The same window where he had once watched Earth's tiny diplomatic ships leave in disgrace. He remembered his smile that day. He remembered feeling powerful and wise. Now he felt nothing but regret. High Arbiter, his aide said nervously. Warlord Kethrak is demanding your surrender. He says if we refuse, he will begin orbital bombardment within the hour. Zelvrix closed his 4 eyes. He had sent messages to every known species begging for help. No one had answered. The Council's former allies were either too weak, too afraid, or too far away to make any difference. Prepare a surrender transmission, he said quietly. There is no point in letting our people die for nothing. The aide bowed and turned to leave. But before he reached the door, alarms began screaming throughout the station. What is happening? Zelvrix demanded. His aide checked his communicator with shaking hands. Massive energy signatures detected at the edge of the system. Something is coming out of hyperspace. Kethrak received the same warning on the crushing hand. He leaned forward in his command throne, his yellow eyes narrowing with interest. Show me, he ordered. The view screen changed. At first, there was only empty space and distant stars. Then, one by one, ships began appearing. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, each vessel taking its assigned position without hesitation. 10 ships, 50 ships, 100 ships. The count kept climbing. What fleet is this? Kethrak growled. Who dares to interfere? His sensor officer studied the readings with confusion. Unknown ship designs, Warlord. They don't match any council species. The energy signatures suggest technology beyond anything we've encountered. 400 ships now filled the view screen. They hung in space like a wall of steel and fire, their dark hulls reflecting nothing. At their center flew the largest vessel, a heavy cruiser with the name Defiance painted on its side. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the Dominion fleet react to their arrival. He can imagine their confusion, their fear. For 10 years, humanity had been a ghost story. Now the ghost had returned with an army. Open a channel, Morrison ordered. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. The communication officer nodded. Channel open, sir. Morrison stepped forward. His voice carried across the void, reaching every ship in the system, every station, every receiver on Varanthos Prime below. This is Admiral Jack Morrison of the United Earth Armada. We are not here for revenge. We are not here for glory. We are here because no one deserves to be abandoned. He paused, letting the words sink in. To the Vorn Dominion, I offer you one chance. Leave this system now, and we will let you go in peace. Stay, and we will destroy you. The choice is yours. On the crushing hand, Warlord Kethrak listened to the message with growing rage. This small species, this insignificant race from a tiny planet dared to threaten him. He had conquered empires. He had crushed armies. He would not be intimidated by newcomers. All ships, attack formation, he commanded. Destroy them all. The Dominion fleet surged forward. Nearly 2,000 warships against 400. The numbers seemed overwhelming. But numbers were not everything. Here they come. Captain Brooks reported from his position on the Defiance's bridge. They're using standard assault patterns. No creativity at all. Morrison smiled grimly. They've never faced an enemy who studied them. Launch fighters. All cruisers begin suppression fire. Let's show them what humanity can do. The battle began. Human ships moved with precision that the Dominion had never seen. They anticipated attacks before they came. They exploited weaknesses that the Dominion did not know they had. Every tactic, every formation, every weapon had been designed specifically to counter the Dominion's strengths. The Defiance led the charge, its weapons tearing through enemy shields like paper. Around it, human cruisers formed a deadly web of crossfire that trapped Dominion ships and destroyed them before they could escape. Enemy flagship identified, the sensor officer announced. The crushing hand, bearing 045. Morrison studied the massive vessel. Warlord Kethrak was there, commanding his forces, believing he could still win. It was time to prove him wrong. Captain Brooks, take your strike team. Disable that flagship. Brooks grinned fiercely. With pleasure, sir. 5 human cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the crushing hand. Dominion ships tried to intercept them, but human fighters cleared the path. Brooks pushed his engines to maximum, racing through explosions and debris. All weapons, concentrate fire on their engine section, he ordered. 5 ships fired as one. The crushing hand shuddered under the impact. Its shields flickered and died. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull. On the bridge of the damaged flagship, Kethrak watched his tactical display turn red. Ship after ship was being destroyed. His fleet was breaking apart. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something he barely recognized. Fear. Warlord, we must retreat, his second-in-command, urged. "The battle is lost." Kethrak wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight to the death. But survival instinct overcame pride. He had escaped defeat before. He would rebuild. He would return. "All ships withdraw," he ordered through gritted teeth. "Fall back to Dominion space." The surviving Dominion vessels began to flee. One by one, they jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind the burning wreckage of their shattered fleet. Of nearly 2,000 ships, fewer than 600 escaped. Admiral Morrison watched them go. His fleet had lost 32 vessels, 32 crews who would never go home. He would mourn them later. For now, there was work to do. All ships, begin rescue operations. Search for survivors, human and alien alike. The battle was over. Against all odds, against all expectations, humanity had won. On Varanthos Prime, High Arbiter Zelvrix stared at his view screen in disbelief. The species he had exiled, the people he had mocked and dismissed, they had saved everything he held dear. He sank into his chair and covered his face with his hands. "What have we done?" he whispered. The aftermath of battle painted the void with light. Human rescue ships moved through the debris field, pulling survivors from shattered hulls and burning wreckage. They did not ask which species the survivors belonged to. They did not check for identification or loyalty. They simply saved everyone they could find. On Varanthos Prime, the people watched in stunned silence. For hours, they had prepared to die. Now they watched the very species their leaders had exiled, working tirelessly to help them. It was almost too much to understand. High Arbiter Zelvrix requested a meeting with the human commanders. He was told to wait. Admiral Morrison was busy coordinating rescue operations. The High Arbiter, who had never waited for anyone in his long career, sat in his chamber and waited. 3 days passed before the meeting took place. Zelvrix arrived at the neutral station where the talks would be held, accompanied by representatives from all 11 council species. On the other side of the table sat Admiral Morrison, Ambassador Diana Cole, and a small group of human officers. The room was silent for a long moment. No one seemed to know how to begin. Finally, Zelvrix spoke. His voice was quiet, stripped of the arrogance that had defined him for so long. "I do not understand," he said. "We expelled you. We humiliated you. We called you dangerous and unworthy of standing among civilized species. Why did you come back? Why did you save us?" Diana Cole leaned forward. She remembered standing in this very station 11 years ago, being told that humanity was no longer welcome in the galaxy. She remembered the anger and the pain. But she also remembered what Admiral Morrison had said on that day. "They think they've silenced us. They've only made us free. Because spite is easy," she said simply. "Doing what's right is harder. We chose harder." Zelvrix shook his head slowly. His 4 eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. "I have ruled the council for 30 years. I have made countless decisions. Expelling humanity was the worst mistake I ever made." Admiral Morrison studied the alien leader. He saw an old man who had finally realized the consequences of his choices. It would have been easy to gloat. It would have been satisfying to remind Zelvrix of every insult, every dismissal, every moment of cruelty. But that was not who Jack Morrison was. That was not who humanity was. "What's done is done," Morrison said. "The question now is what happens next." The council representatives exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a female from the species called Divinari, found the courage to speak. "We wish to offer humanity full reinstatement in the Galactic Council," she said. "All previous restrictions would be lifted. You would have a seat at every table, a voice in every decision. We would honor you as heroes." Diana almost laughed. After everything they had suffered, the Council wanted them back. They wanted humanity to return to the same system that had rejected them. The same system that had called them dangerous for showing mercy. No, she said. The Council representatives looked shocked. Zelvrix leaned forward with confusion on his face. You refuse? After saving us, you refuse to rejoin? Morrison stood and walked to the window. Outside, human ships still moved through space, still rescuing survivors, still doing the work that needed to be done. The old council was built on fear, he said. Fear of difference. Fear of independence. Fear of any species that dared to think for itself. We will not be part of that system. He turned back to face the table. But we will be part of something new. A real alliance. One where every species is equal. One where helping others is celebrated instead of punished. One where mercy is a strength, not a weakness. The chamber fell silent. The council representatives looked at each other with uncertainty. What Morrison was proposing would change everything. It would require them to give up power they had held for centuries. Zelvrix was the first to speak. You would trust us? After what we did? Diana answered for them. Trust is earned, not given. We're offering you a chance to earn it. The question is whether you're willing to try. The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. There were arguments and disagreements. Old grudges surfaced and had to be addressed. But slowly, carefully, a new agreement took shape. They called it the Accord of Varanthos. It dissolved the old Galactic Council and created a new organization, the Allied Worlds, with humanity as a founding member. Every species would have an equal voice. Decisions would require consensus instead of simple votes. And the first principle of the new alliance would be simple. No one gets left behind. The signing ceremony was held in the same chamber where humanity had been expelled 11 years earlier. Admiral Morrison signed on behalf of Earth. Zelvrix signed on behalf of the former Council species. When the last signature was recorded, applause filled the room. Morrison stepped outside to find Captain Brooks waiting for him. The younger officer had aged greatly during the battle, but his eyes still held that familiar fire. It's done, Morrison said. We're part of the galaxy again. On our terms this time. Brooks nodded slowly. And the Dominion? Morrison's expression grew serious. They're still out there. Weakened, but not destroyed. Kethrak will rebuild. He'll come back eventually. Then we'll be ready, Brooks said. 1 month later, Admiral Morrison announced his retirement. He had served humanity for over 40 years. He had seen them cast out and watched them rise again. It was time for younger hands to guide the fleet. His final act was to promote Ryan Brooks to Admiral. The ceremony was held aboard the Defiance, surrounded by the officers who had built the Armada from nothing. The galaxy is changing, Morrison said in his farewell speech. We have new allies, new responsibilities, new challenges. But I have no fear for the future, because I know what humanity is capable of. I've seen it with my own eyes. He turned to Brooks and saluted. The fleet is yours, Admiral. Take care of her. Brooks returned the salute with tears in his eyes. I will, sir. I promise. Morrison walked off the bridge for the last time. Diana Cole was waiting for him in the corridor. What will you do now? She asked. Morrison smiled. Go home, watch the sunset. Maybe finally read all those books I've been putting off. They walked together toward the shuttle bay. Behind them, the sounds of the ship continued. Engines humming. Crews working. Life going on. We did it, Diana said softly. We really did it. Morrison nodded. They exiled us to the darkness. We returned carrying the light. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly in every direction. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was licking its wounds. Somewhere out there, new challenges waited. But humanity was no longer alone. They had allies now. They had purpose, and they had proven once and for all that the measure of a species was not in their power to destroy, but in their courage to protect. The Armada continued its patrol, watching over a galaxy that had finally learned to welcome them home.